anxious Googling, which is what I had been doing. And so we all kind of start from that place of it was exhausting just getting to the starting line. And there is a lot of room for misbehavior. There is a lot of room for taking advantage.
That's Crystal. Once a hopeful parent, is now a member of the Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions Matching and Education team. She was just like so many of the families we meet, overwhelmed, unsure who to trust, and trying to make one of the biggest decisions of her life with almost no guidance.
And so we all kind of start from that place of it was exhausting just getting to the starting line. And now what?
Experiencing that moment, that realization, and that firsthand knowledge has made Crystal an amazing educator and support for hopeful parents because she remembers exactly what it felt like to be searching for clarity in a process that can feel incredibly overwhelming.
I so desperately wanted to control the outcome. I just want to control the outcome. And the hardest part about this journey is there is no controlling it.
In today's episode, Crystal shares the emotional and ethical realities of navigating this journey as an intended parent, the red flags, the lessons she learned, and the clarity and support she hopes to give every family just starting this journey. Enjoy. So, okay, Crystal, you show up for intended parents with so much empathy, so much steadiness, and a lot of that is rooted in your own story. But before we talk about the work that you do now, can you take us back to just those early days of your family building journey and what those first chapters were like for you?
For sure, for sure. So, like a lot of our intended parents, I did eat IVF forever, and it didn't work forever. And then we did get pregnant and had our first daughter, Everly, but we had her very early.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that tiny body could not survive in the outside world long enough. And so she was with us for only 19 days, just a few weeks. And what we learned was first that we were meant to be parents. Like meeting her just taught us, oh, we kind of thought we wanted to do this, and now we're like, oh, we're meant to have children. Like
Mm.
we're built to be parents. And so how do we do that now? And after meeting with a lot of doctors, way too many doctors, we learned that the chances of us ending up in the same position were like 70%. That there was
Mhm.
a 70% chance we would lose another child, and that I would likely die in the process. And so we realized, okay, this is not a good route for us to go again. And this is so funny. I don't think I ever told you this, but when we were like middle of grief and loss and postpartum and figuring out surrogacy, we realized we couldn't make it really good decisions in our own life. Like we were just too emotional about everything. So we appointed a board of directors for our life, and sent them all a letter saying, this is what we're looking at. This is what we're thinking. Here's what the doctors have said. Here's the statistics. Here's every study that's ever been done on surrogacy. What do you think? And they all came back unanimously and said, we think you should do surrogacy. And so we jumped 2 feet into this world, and didn't even know what jumping in 2 feet looked like. We were like, what do we, do you just like, is there like 1-800 surrogate? Like what do you do? Who
Yeah.
do you call? Um, and so I just started Googling furiously, trying to learn
Mhm.
everything that I could. And I learned some really exciting things and I learned some really scary things,
Yeah.
and all kinds of things that eventually, thankfully, led me here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Obviously, there's so much between then and where you are now. When you think back, you know, obviously you walk through moments that no parent should have to prepare for. But when you do think about that season now, what helped you begin taking those steps forward? Whether, I mean, I know we have a lot of intended parents who are in so many different phases of their parenting journey. And they, it always feels like they need to figure out what that next right step is. What were those things that helped you move forward?
Well, the first thing was our age. We were both
Mm,
like late 30s, early 40s, going, yeah, we're doing the math that all of our intended parents do of how old will I be at their high school graduation. And then when you learn that matching isn't automatic, you don't just meet a surrogate the day that you sign up and you're paired and you begin a journey, but this could take up to a year or maybe
yeah.
even more than a year before you even transfer an embryo. We became really motivated to move quickly. Um, we also, I mean, there were moments of like motivated to move quickly and then moments of like, this may never happen, despair. Like, is this
Yeah.
ever going to work out for us? And I remember this distinct moment of walking through my neighborhood, listening to podcasts on surrogacy, trying to learn
Hmm.
about anything I could learn. And there was a doctor on one of the podcasts who said, statistically, if you're willing to keep going, you will have a baby. You may encounter some losses. You may have to engage with an egg donor. You might have to do more than one transfer. But if you just keep going, there is a 0.0% chance that you will end up without a baby. And I remember feeling so hopeful after I heard that of if we can just keep going, if we can just take the next step, whatever the next step is, if it's just one more step. I clung to, I don't even know what podcast that was or who that doctor was.
Yeah.
But I clung to that doctor's words for our whole journey because we encountered some loss even after.
Hmm.
And there were moments where I thought, is this ever going to happen? And I just kept thinking, if you just keep going, if you just statistically, if you just keep going, you will come home with a baby. And that is what happened.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so hard in the midst of grief and loss to find those moments of hope as you're trying to, like you said, get to just wanting to be a mom. When you matched with your surrogate, what stood out to you kind of just about those early conversations and that initial connection, even just as you entered this world and then got into that matching process? How did, maybe those emotions with your own history, like what were you experiencing? And then how did those emotions, what did they look like for you as you were kind of trying to build that trust in the moment as well?
All the emotions were big. That I don't
Yeah.
think I had a small emotion the whole time. We did something that seemed crazy to me at the time when I was talking with this agency. Actually, it was suggested that we share our story on social media, and I remember thinking that is insane. There's no chance I'm going to do that. And then they said, "Well, we have seen parents match faster that way." And
Mhm.
you're not sharing it on your social media, you're just really sharing it on ours, on the agency side. And we have surrogates who watch our social channels, and some of them are just waiting for the right family. And so we just want you to think about it. And so at that point, I was like, if it can help us meet someone who is willing to work with us and willing to help, let's give anything a shot. And so we shared our story, and this is not typical. I recognize that not every family it happens this way, but our surrogate responded to that story in a matter of hours, and we matched very quickly. Within a week, we had been thinking that this was going to be 3 weeks to 10 months, which I often tell parents that it is.
Mhm.
And so to meet someone that quickly felt like a miracle.
Yeah.
And I'm a person of faith. I was working in ministry at the time. So there is like a part of that that to me felt like more than just happenstance, more than just luck. But even if it was luck, I was super thankful for it. And met that person, and instantly on a match meeting call was like, oh, this is a really good person. This is a
Mhm.
really good human who has options, right? This, it's not
Yeah.
like this was their only option in life. They chose to do this. And G was incredible. G's husband instantly connected with my husband, and pretty quickly there was just a sense of, oh, I think this is probably meant to be, which lasted for about 10 seconds after the match meeting call before the anxiety hit of, but what if I'm wrong? Even
Mm.
though it was meant they're like the best human, every part of them is like giving and wholesome in every part of their life. They are a servant in every area of their life. They are trustworthy in every area of their life. There was still a part of me that had an anxiety flood after that call of, what if they're not who they say they are? Who's
Yeah.
checking? How do I know? How do I? And I started doing like furious Googling on their first name because that is all I had at that point, which is not healthy. And I probably should have just called my therapist. That is not a healthy way to handle it. I think had I known everything that the agency was doing on the other side to make sure that this person was like legally background checked and that
Mhm.
they'd had interviews and they'd had conversations and that their medical records, I didn't know any of those things. I was just like, what if they're not as amazing as they seem? And that um that's kind of a theme I think for a lot of journeys, right? Like as I talk to intended parents, there's a sense of like, how can I trust this person? And what I wish I could tell them is like, everything is verifiable. Every single thing about their life, you will see every detail and you will be able to verify every time they drink a Diet Coke, and you'll know exactly how many milligrams of caffeine they get a day, and you'll know every single move that they make. But that's not realistic. There was a whole part of our journey that was, you are trusting this person. You
Mhm.
have to trust this person. And
Mhm.
so eventually we kind of came to the conclusion of, we just met, we know as much about them as we're going to know, which is not a lot, and we're going to either trust her or not trust her. And what I can't do is try to then control everything the whole way.
Mm.
So that's what we ended up saying. We think this is a trustworthy person. And very fortunately, we lived in the same city. And I know that's not true for most families. We lived in the same city. And so within a week of matching, we were at their home having dinner with our GC and her husband and kids. And um, at the time we met in person, all those questions about are they who they say they are they as
Mhm.
wonderful as they seem just sort of dissipated, because as soon as you're face to face, and I think that happens for a lot of families that transfer, when you're face to face for the first time, you get that real sense of like who they are as a person, and how trustworthy they really are. And that was what happened for us. As soon as we met, it was like, okay, I think we're
Yeah.
going to be just fine.
No, for sure, for sure. You've kind of touched on it, in various ways, but as you look at what you do today, what parts of your journey show up the most in how you care for and guide, hopeful parents who are just at the beginning of theirs?
So much of our own journey is like baked into every call with intended
Yeah.
parents, because they come in the same way I did, right? Nobody comes in on an easy road. Even families who know that they are coming in, that surrogacy is their only option, right?
Mhm.
Like LGBTQ families often know that surrogacy is their only option, but it still wasn't an easy road to get here. There's a ton of anxiety, there's a ton of financial stress, there's a ton of anxious Googling, which is what I had been doing. And so we all kind of start from that place of, it was exhausting just getting to the starting line.
Yeah.
And now what? Um, and one of the things that I say to them, which often is met with, yeah, us too, is, hey, I went down some Google rabbit holes that really scared me
Mhm.
when we started this. And what I learned is this is a really unregulated industry, and there is a lot of room for misbehavior. There is a lot of room for taking advantage of underserved women in ways that can exploit them. And there is a lot of room for taking advantage of desperate parents who just want to have a baby. And there's a real need to verify that who you're working with is an ethical organization with ethical practices. And so when I sit with, and I learned all this through anxious Googling and Facebook groups and Reddit threads. Um, but now when I sit with intended parents, I get to tell them, hey, here's the shortcut to learning those things. Anytime you meet with an agency, you want to ask, do you follow all medical best practice guidelines set out by ASRM? That's the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. If someone says, no, we don't follow medical best practice guidelines, that's a red flag, because your clinic certainly does. And the last thing you want is to spend your life savings to match with a surrogate who doesn't meet medical guidelines and then pay your clinic more money to tell you that she's actually disqualified. And so that's a first step. The other thing I tell intended parents is ask anyone you work with, are they a member of SEEDS, the Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy? That's kind of the ethical best practice. And neither of these are like the highest standard over and above. These are baseline agreements for
Mm-hmm.
how ethical agencies operate. And can you verify those two things? That's a great first step. When we began trying to figure those things out, pretty quickly, those directories, the ASRM and SEEDS, led us here. And then we also went down just a lot of surrogacy agency reviews, right? Like there are Facebook groups just for reviews. And one of the things that I tried to figure out, and this is super weird, but I was really worried about a surrogate being someone who is being taken advantage of. And how do I know that she has other options and is choosing to do this versus has a financial pressure that is forcing her to make a decision about her body she wouldn't otherwise have made?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I looked at is in agency review groups, who did the surrogate say treated them well? Who did they say, I had a great experience, I had a lot of choice, I had an agency that was advocating for me? That ultimately is what led me here to Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions as a client. I wasn't planning on changing careers to come here as a staff member, but that eventually was the very driving force that led me also to change careers and come here as a staff member. Because when I realized, oh, not every player is ethical, and then this player is trying to raise the bar on ethical standards in the industry, I was like, that's a mission I want to be a part of, which was really exciting.
For sure. Sitting in the seat where you're sitting, where it can be so overwhelming to go down those Google rabbit holes and Reddit threads and, just all of those things. What do you feel like are maybe just some misconceptions or unrealistic expectations you kind of see that can maybe unintentionally create ethical concerns or mismatches?
I mean, if I'm going to be super blunt, and I am sometimes with intended parents, people are not products. You are not renting a person. You are not renting a uterus. These are women who have signed up to help a family and to partner with you. They're not your employee, and they shouldn't be treated like your employee. Yes, there is compensation exchanged. And one of the ways I explain it sometimes to intended parents is if you were in a car accident with that person and it was your responsibility, then you might be responsible to pay for pain and suffering. But that doesn't mean that they're your employee. It doesn't mean you're going to send them a W-2 at the end of the year. And it doesn't mean you're in charge of their decisions. It doesn't mean that you get to boss them around.
Mm,
And this is kind of more similar to that, that
yeah.
they are going to endure some pain and suffering. There is some compensation for that, but you are not, this is not an employer employee relationship. This is a two families coming together to help each other kind of relationship. And when you treat it that way, that's when you see people have their really best journeys
Mhm.
versus when one party tries to hold control. And that is what it comes down to, right? Is control. That parents, very much like me, come in with a tough story. We've seen all the ways it can go wrong. We're anxious about it going wrong again, because there is something about trauma that rewires your brain to believe if it went badly before, it's going to go badly again. So
Mhm.
it becomes kind of difficult to see even a good outcome on the horizon. And so we have a tendency to try to control our way out of that anxiety and introducing rules and regulations on a GC that she was never meant to carry, that she never signed up for, in an effort to just have some sense of control. And that is where you see journeys get off the rails. I share this with a lot of intended parents that our GC was as responsible as they get, just the best kind of human. Um, she is professionally in medical practice. She could be trusted with medical decisions. And she's vegan. She has the healthiest diet you can have. And still, I would lay awake at night thinking, did she get enough protein today? Should
Mm.
I ask her if she got enough protein today? And like years later, stepping back from that, that is an unhinged thought. Like, that is, do I need to call her and ask if she got enough protein? Is like, no, I should call my own therapist and make an appointment because that is insanity. But I so desperately wanted to control the outcome.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there were times where my husband was like, "Hey, we're not going to do that. we're not going to, we're not going to make that call because that is wild." But I see parents all the time who are like, I just want to control the outcome. And the hardest part about this journey is there is no controlling it.
Yeah.
There is no controlling the outcome, and controlling a person is not going to make it better. It's
Mhm.
only going to make it more complicated.
Mhm. No, for sure. We'll get right back to the show. But real quick, if you're dreaming of growing your family through egg donation or surrogacy, we'd love to help. At Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions, we've spent 18 years guiding hopeful parents with compassion, expertise, and personal experience. Our team includes people who have been intended parents, surrogates, egg donors, and even nurses. So when we say we understand, we truly do. You can schedule a free 15-minute call with our team at createahappyfamily.com to get your questions answered and explore your next steps. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. We're here to walk it with you. All right, let's get back to the show. From going back to that, the ethical practices, kind of have already touched on ASRM and seeds, but what do you think intended parents deserve to understand clearly before they step into surrogacy?
Oh, so many things. Number one, any agency should be able to tell you when they take your money and when you're going to get matched based on that. Like, we don't, as an agency, we don't take any money until match. And that doesn't mean that's the only way to do things. It's just how we choose to do things. But for the agencies, and I talked to several in our journey who take tens of thousands of dollars to put you on a list.
Mm,
Any parent deserves to ask the question, when do I get off that list? And if you're guaranteeing me a match, are you guaranteeing me that that person meets ASRM guidelines? Because if you just give me a match and I take them to my clinic and my clinic says no, I'm no further down the road. And I do feel like I talk more times than I should. I talk to intended parents who have gone to agencies, paid tens of thousands of dollars, sat on a list for 2 years, or they saw one or two candidates who were not qualified in years, and they have lost years of their parenting journey to this.
mhm.
And then they come to us and say, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? And so I tell every parent, you should ask any agency you talk with, when do you take my money? How long am I on that list? Is my surrogate medically qualified when I match with her? And how do you know? The other thing that has come up in conversation a lot with intended parents is the idea of everything in house and how good that sounds, right? Like, it sounds like almost like a less complicated journey when someone says, "Oh, we have attorneys in house and we have escrow in house."
It's
But the reality
wildly
is,
convenient when you've talked to so many
sure,
people and you're already I've got to talk to this doctor and that doctor. And, it sounds amazing.
in house seems like it's more convenient and it's less complicated. But the reality is, you don't want everybody to be in house,
Hmm.
as you don't want your attorney on the payroll of your agency. You want your attorney to be a neutral third party who represents you.
Hmm.
And by the same token, you don't want your escrow company on the payroll of your agency. You want them to be a neutral third party who represents you. And in the best interest of intended parents, we have that conversation all the time of, in-house sounds great, but do you really want all of the parties who represent you to be under one roof? Because we've seen in the industry when that goes south, right? Like,
Hmm.
we've seen when an agency closes and they had in-house escrow and they take all the escrow money, and those parents don't have any recourse because there is no third party to advocate for them. That's one of the reasons that we work so hard, to make sure every intended parent we work with works with Seed Trust Escrow. It's not just that we have like a favorite escrow company, though we love working with them, but it's that Seed Trust has all of the protections in place to make sure that sort of fraud doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And more importantly, they have the insurance in place to cover intended parents in the event that money were stolen, for example, in a cybersecurity threat. We see so many medical facilities getting hit with cyber attacks and ransomware attacks. And if that were to happen, our understanding is that Seed Trust has so much insurance in place that intended parents would be protected, which is why we choose to work with them. Um, is that going too in detail? That was a
No, you're
lot.
so no, you're so right. And we've been lucky enough to we spoke with Adam, who is, the president of Sea Trust. And, Sea Trust does an amazing job of being incredibly transparent about what all of those protections are and, all of those things. And not only is that a benefit for intended parents, but it's a benefit to surrogates as well. They, again, it's that neutral party. And, there isn't somebody that is looking to the agency. It's looking to that contract that's in place, what has been agreed upon, making sure that there's checks and balances. And in an industry that can get, dicey sometimes, unfortunately. And like, as you said in the beginning, it can feel so you're working with a population that, for lack of a better word, it feels desperate. And so you do kind
Yeah,
of say
yeah.
sometimes are in a situation where you feel like you have to say yes to something, even if, the back of your mind, it just doesn't quite feel right. And so to have those trusted just industry professionals in place is so vital and so important. So you're not worrying about those things and you do get to enjoy your journey. Same thing with attorneys. Like gestational carriers having that representation, their own, and intended parents having their own, and as you put it, not being on an agency payroll. They have that representation and that advocacy in place.
That is such a conversation that comes up all the time. I think that's really surprising to intended parents is that surrogates will have their own representation, their own legal representation, but there is no way to do it where everyone's sharing an attorney and one person's paying the bill, but it's not a conflict of interest. It's always going to be a conflict. And so we want to make sure that GCs are fairly represented. And so they have their own attorney. The other thing that surprises a lot of intended parents is that those attorneys will be in the state where the surrogate lives because
Mm-hmm.
that's where you file for parentage. And those are the only state laws that actually matter in a surrogacy journey is where the baby's going to be born. And so often I have the conversation with parents who say, I've already talked to an attorney. We're ready to go. And I'm like, hold on. I'm so glad you're talking to someone. There's a strong chance that your surrogate will be in a different state and different state laws will apply. We want to make sure you have someone who's licensed in that state because of all the things in life that you want to gamble on going wrong. Your legal rights to be the parent of that baby are not the thing that you want to go wrong. And so we want to make sure you have someone licensed in the state where you will get those legal rights.
Exactly. And we have definitely heard horror stories of when, that has not been the case. But again, it's having the industry professionals who are transparent and who do look at all of those aspects of things that no matter, how many times you Google or Reddit thread, you might not know until you've experienced it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is, just also such a benefit to being aware of who you're working with, how long they've been in the industry, just all of those things.
Yeah. I feel like that's becoming a more common conversation with parents too, just as the entire industry grows. I think parents are becoming more educated as they're coming in and they're
Mhm.
asking questions, good questions like how long have you been an agency? How many families do you match each year?
Yeah.
How many cases do your coordinators have? Which is a great question because there are times if you have one coordinator trying to manage 100 families, that's more than what they could realistically do. And so I do notice that parents are coming in with really good questions about just operational practices as an agency that don't seem super exciting to think about when you're on the front end of a journey, but they end up being really important as you're going through the journey. And I'm happy to see parents who are asking, honestly, far better questions than I asked.
How do you, again, sitting in the seat that you sit in now, How do you kind of help families navigate the balance between their hopes, their fear, and but also, kind of what's what's fair, what's healthy for everyone involved and educating them on just the journey as a whole?
Things that I am pretty committed to that honestly is a little bit hard is just acknowledging what is true, even when it's not comfortable.
Mm,
And what is true is that there are no guarantees. And IVF gets marketed like a sure thing. And so many of our families know that it isn't. Surrogacy also gets talked about like a sure thing. And we try to acknowledge upfront that it's not, that 50% of embryo transfers to a surrogate work. And the reality is, it's a coin flip every time. Now, if you tried 3 times, there's a 95% live birth rate. And so your chances are high, but it's still not 100%. And so we try to acknowledge, even when that's not the most fun thing to talk about, rather than sell somebody on working with us as an agency, I do try to acknowledge what is true and where the risk is that this might not work out. Um, the other thing that comes up a lot is how to mitigate risk and whose job it is. And ultimately, as an agency, we do everything that can be done to mitigate risk. The clinics we work with do everything that can be done to mitigate risk. But beyond what the professionals are saying, right? Beyond what maybe her doctor is saying, beyond what the clinic is saying, it's not helpful when intended parents try to add rules on top of that
mm.
to mitigate risk. First of all, they don't actually end up mitigating any risk. It just ends up making the relationship more complicated. And we have seen things, right? Like parents who have food restrictions, or you can only eat out of this kind of container, or you can only wear these brands of makeup, or you can only take these brands of prenatal vitamins. And ultimately, those things don't end up mitigating a lot of risk. They're also not realistic in terms of what is enforceable. You can ask someone, would you mind doing X, Y, or Z? But to be able to determine or verify if that person is doing those things is almost impossible. And so it just, what we think is going to create less anxiety as intended parents ends up creating more, because we
Hmm.
can never verify that what we have agreed upon is actually what's taking place. And so there is just a constant sense of it's not enough, and there needs to be more control, and there needs to be um, more verifying, and it becomes a cycle that really is unhealthy. And so one of the things that I've talked to intended parents about, and I know it's not easy and I know I have failed at doing it, but I still think it's the best, is to pick a date, whether that date is the day that you match or the transfer date. But you pick a date where you're going to hand the baton of trust to that GC, and then you don't pick it up again. That you're going
Mm.
to trust her, and you're going to go through this journey trusting her, and and you really can't take that back. Now, if someone were to do something wildly untrustworthy, I can understand where that might be difficult. But for 99% of journeys, surrogates are doing the very best they can to care for your baby the way they would care for their own. And so just to over and over tell yourself, I trust them, I trust them, I trust them,
Hmm.
is the only way to enjoy this journey going forward.
I do want to go back to, I think, something that's really important because, and matching is kind of is of course like the beginning of, just like you said, developing that trust and that relationship. And it's a really sensitive part of surrogacy. And you will have agencies that will give you that 100% match, but match doesn't necessarily mean approval. And
No.
you kind of talked about that. Are they going, is my surrogate going to be medically approved? And all of those things. So, what do you think, having experienced it and now being, on this side of the industry, what do you think makes a truly aligned match between a surrogate and a hopeful parent?
Oh, I mean, medical approval certainly does help. Like, even
Hey.
beyond the personality stuff, if a surrogate doesn't meet medical guidelines, it is such a heavy loss on the intended parent side. Not only are you paying your clinic to tell you that, but you're also like just putting in the emotional labor of getting to know that person and building trust with that person only to find out that they were never qualified to begin with. That's a really tough one. And so that's actually one of the reasons that our team does so much work on the front end to make sure, like, we review medical records and we get them directly from the provider to make sure no medical records are missing. And we have a team who goes through those to look for anything that might be a disqualifier so that we're not introducing intended parents to well-meaning, very kind surrogates who actually can't help them.
Mhm.
And so that medical side of it is a big deal. But beyond that, there is so much value in the personality match. And I think that's something that we care a lot about. Like, there are clear preferences, right? We don't want to match a surrogate in Idaho with a family who only wants a surrogate in Texas. Location matters. Lots of families care a lot about vaccines that a surrogate does or doesn't take, or they care a lot about termination views, and that's super important to decide on the front end. But even after all those matching factors are satisfied, there is so much to a personality fit and figuring out, is this the kind of person that I want to talk to for the next 18 months of my life minimum? Because minimum, this journey is going to be 18 months before there's a baby in the home, sometimes 2 years. Are you going to have anything to talk about? It's also, I think a lot of intended parents underestimate the value of a surrogate's spouse
Mm,
and the role that they play in this journey, and which is why when we have a match meeting, if there's a partner, it's the surrogate and the partner. If there's a partner, it's the intended parent and the partner. And everybody's on the call because those partners can make this journey awesome or really, really hard. And so we want everybody to have transparency and meet everybody else on the front end to figure out, is this someone that I want to talk to? Is
mhm,
this someone that I could solve a conflict with if there is one? Because the reality is there are going to be surprises. There are zero perfect journeys. And so there are going to be times where either there's a disagreement or there's a difficult medical diagnosis or there's a complication with providers. And are these people that I could talk through that scenario with? Because that's even more important than, do we have anything that we could talk about together? And is this ultimately somebody that I trust to babysit my kid? Would I allow them to babysit my child who's already here for 9 months? Because they are babysitting your child for 9 months, and we want you to feel great about who that person is. And then the same is true on the surrogate side, right? Like, are these people you want to talk to for the next 18 months?
yeah.
Are these people that you trust that you could solve a conflict or a difficult situation and that they would advocate for you? Not just advocate for their own interests, but advocate for your interests in the process. Because if not, it's probably not a good match. And there are other matches out there.
Mhm. Mhm. I think the idea of patience when you're already in a scenario that
So hard.
it's so hard. I mean, you said it best. You and Tom in the midst of grief were like, "Hey, we don't want to be 80 at high school graduation. We've got to get this going." And I mean, it feels so time sensitive. Every hour feels like it's one more year. And that lack of patience can sometimes lead to just, it's fine. I'll just deal with it. It's fine. It's not that big of a
Yes.
deal. And really, at the end of the day, yes, there are maybe some things where you're like, that's not as important as maybe I thought it would be. But those big, huge things that kind of sit with you, those are so important to be aware of as you approach a match. What what maybe are some questions that you encourage, intended parents to ask early on as they're kind of building trust and transparency and, just building that relationship?
So good. I love when intended parents ask in a match meeting, what kind of communication do you like? Because some
Mm,
people are text messengers and some people feel like a text message is really impersonal. And some people love a phone call and some people feel like they're in trouble if you call them on the phone. And I think it's so important early on to just name it. How do you communicate? How do you communicate? How are we as a unit going to communicate with each other so that everybody feels good about it? The other things that I think are really important to ask is, if we disagree on something, how do you want to handle that? Do you want me to call you and talk about it? Do you want me to send you a long text message so you can think about your answer and respond? Do you
Mhm.
want me to only communicate difficult things through coordinators, which by the way, coordinators are amazing at helping you navigate sticky circumstances. There's never a time to go with a sticky or a difficult conversation around a coordinator, that those are
Yep.
the ones that you want help with. But to have those conversations about what are our rules of engagement early on
Mhm.
is so important. I've found, and Lauren Palmer, our matching manager, is incredible. She navigates these conversations all the time. The last thing that I think I had a luxury of having, because we were local, but I still would advocate that any family have, is just time in person,
Mhm.
that trust is built face to face. And in those long, annoying stretches before you transfer an embryo, when you're waiting on the clinic and then you're going to transfer day and then you're waiting on legal contracts, if there are opportunities to get face to face and have dinner together, to ride from the airport together, to meet up and have coffee together, to talk about life and not even the journey, to talk about life together, those are golden months where you can build trust before anything has happened. Nothing is complicated before there's a baby involved, right? Before we're pregnant, there are no difficult diagnoses, there are no hard conversations or difficult decisions to make. And so when things are easy, that's the time to put in an effort with FaceTime and showing up more and more phone calls and getting to know each other. Um, that you can kind of build a bridge of trust at that point that is strong enough to sustain hard circumstances later if they were to come. And I remember our surrogate was so good at this. She kind of led the charge in this way. And I'm so thankful that she did. She called me once and she said, I'd like for us to have coffee. And I would like for us to ask each other this list of questions from the internet that you should ask someone you're planning on dating or marrying. And I was like, what a weird thing to do. And okay. And she had printed a list of questions for the internet for dating couples. I don't remember if it was like questions to ask on a first date or questions to ask when you get married, but it was relationship questions about things like, how do you want to celebrate good things? How do you want to talk about hard things? What does communication look like? How do you build trust? Like all of these things that ended up being such a healthy conversation for us to have over coffee that I would have never signed up for or
Mhm.
initiated. I don't know that every family should have a list of dating questions that you ask your surrogate. It's weird. Um, but prioritizing FaceTime and having like just friendship building conversations goes such a long way. Then when there is a difficult circumstance or there is a misunderstanding
Mhm.
or somebody does drop the ball or let each other down or communicates in a way that wasn't as good as it could have been, there's already a relational foundation to sustain that moment rather than trying to build it when things are already hard.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's such a major point. I know when I was speaking with surrogates in their very beginning, a lot of times you would ask, some of those like questions, and they would always, "Oh, well, whatever the intended parents want." And same for intended parents. "Oh, whatever she wants." And everyone is just so grateful and happy for each other. And it's one of those things where questions like that of, how do I want to be communicated to? And how do I want to handle bad news? And just having those questions, to think about for yourself is so helpful, because at the end of the day, it's one of those, yes, I know right now it's, oh, whatever they want. But is it really truly like whatever they want, or do
Mhm.
you actually have an opinion in that? And let's talk
Right.
about it. Let's be upfront and transparent about it. So,
Okay.
because you've lived this journey yourself, what do you think is important for surrogates to understand about just the emotional world that intended parents are navigating?
Oh, it's so good because I feel like every surrogate I have worked with or had the chance to meet or interview, they are such good-hearted people and they just want to help. And sometimes it I have heard them say things like, I don't understand why that intended parent doesn't trust me. I'm doing
Mm,
everything I can to take care of their baby. Why does they seem like they don't trust me? And the reality is it has nothing to do with you. It
mm,
has to do with the fact that they don't trust life and the process by which life is created at this point. They have seen all the hard things happen, and there is something in our brain that feels foolish for being hopeful. And
mm,
every time they reach a milestone that feels more hopeful, you may notice that they get more anxious because that kind of hope feels really dangerous and it feels like they're going to get their heart shattered. And none of I'll speak for all the intended parents, none of us are our best selves when we come into this. None of us are the healthiest versions of ourselves, and we are so grateful for surrogates who are willing to work with us anyway. And so patience, I would say, to any GC, knowing that it really is not a reflection of how they feel about you, it's a reflection of how they feel about life.
mhm,
um, and that they still better treat you with respect and kindness. And this is a great moment to reach out to your coordinator if it ever feels off, because a lot of times when we parents are not at our best selves, we're also not at our most self-aware selves.
mm,
And so we may think that it feels perfectly normal and fine to you that we're checking in 5 times a week. And we don't know that that felt super weird. I asked our GC to download a kick counter
mm,
app and share the password with me, and so that I could see all the times the baby kicked, and not thinking about how that affected her life, how many times a day she was having to stop what she was doing to do the kick counter app. And she was very kind and gracious, but looking back, I'm like, that was a pretty out of bounds request. That was a big request that took up a good chunk of her day every day. And that would have been a great time if she felt, not great about it. She was super sweet, but to reach out to our coordinator who would have helped us navigate, like, hey, maybe we don't need to have every day have this kind of data flowing in. Um, but those are the things that I think like any GC should feel respected, cared for, advocated for, and also very patient with
mm.
those of us who are struggling.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at Everly's impact, stories, arrival, and the work you do every day, how do you see all these chapters coming together in your life now?
It really kind of feels like one big story now. And in fact, that's why we named our second daughter Story. Our first daughter was named Everly to remind her that every person is made for forever, and people who are made for forever have worth and value. And our second daughter, her first name is Emrys, which also means made for forever. So they share forever names, but she goes by her middle name Story because we wanted her to remember that regardless of this chapter, the story is good
Mm,
and your life is going in a good direction. Even if this chapter, some chapters are going to feel good, some are going to feel really hard. Um, but it was almost, her name was almost a lesson to ourselves of we had been through some really good chapters and some really hard chapters. And it was difficult at times to imagine that the story was good, that there would ever be a headline that said this life story is a good one because we've been through some really hard things. And so now it all feels a little bit woven together, and both of our daughters have become this really good life story that results not only in our family being complete, but also in us helping to create other happy families and share with them in the hard chapters that, hey, the story can still be good even if you're in a hard chapter.
that's beautiful. For someone listening who is grieving or unsure, or they're just standing at the beginning of the process and they don't even know what to do next, what would you want them to hear today?
I think I would want any parent to know the same thing that I needed to hear, which is if you're willing to just keep going, there will be a baby on the other side of it. And there might be some difficult choices between here and there. It might not be the story that you thought you were going to have. It might be written differently. There might be chapters that involve surrogates and donors and different kinds of family building that seem like seem like not as good a storyline.
Hmm.
But on the other side, there are a whole group of us parents who will tell you that what felt like a not as good story now feels like the best story. That what felt like plan B now feels like plan A for us. That this is how it was meant to be all along, and that that is a possibility for them too.
Thank you, Crystal. You were just, I mean, thank you so much for just your honesty, your encouragement. I mean, again, like your lived experience continues to just make such a difference for the families we serve. And I mean, just your voice just continues to remind so many parents that they are not alone in this. And there is a whole group of parents that have been down this road are going down this road, and for a journey that can feel like you're on an island,
Yeah.
you do such a beautiful job of reminding everybody that they are not the only one. And I am so grateful for all the ways that you love on just these amazing parents and surrogates that we get to work with. My last question for you, you know that it's coming. Me and coffee, she and I, two peas in a pod. Cheers,
I'm
girl.
ready.
What has filled your cup? Literally or figuratively, what has been the thing that has filled your cup?
So my tiny human story started talking all at once. I think some kids babble and say a few words. She just picked up all the words and started saying them all the time. And and it's such a sweet thing to talk about. But my career before this is I was a professional writer, and words are a big deal to me. And I always kind of wondered, would I have a child who loved language or who hated language? And how is that the sort of thing that gets passed on? Is that environmental? How does all of that work? And so to see her fall in love with words and want to learn them in English, want to learn them in Spanish, want to learn them in Chinese. She wants to learn all the words, and she wants to say them all the time, which is, candidly, I'm an introvert. It's a little exhausting from time to time, but it is such a cup filler to see her every day come up and say new words and be so excited that she knows them. So that's been really fun.
That's beautiful. Have you been
So
keeping track of
sweet.
the words that you like refuse to fix?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, cucumber is
Mhm.
kukimolo, and I hope she calls it a kukimolo for the rest of her life.
Beautiful. Done and done. Yes.
It's the best.
Oh, that is the best. Our one of my favorites was for my kiddos, it was restaurant.
Oh, it's the best. That is the best.
It is. It is. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. And it just, I mean, it really, it makes, it's those little things like that's the joy. And that is the joy that I'm so excited that we get to bring to other people.
It
And
is.
again,
Oh,
thank you.
what can I share one last thing that's filling my cup,
Please.
because I just thought about it with our words and I would be so sad not to talk about it. So we read books a lot. Her name is Story, so we read lots of stories. But we she has just become interested. We've always read The Very Kind Koala, which is a story about surrogacy, but she just now is interested in The Very Kind Koala. And so she brings me the koala book multiple times a day. I would
Hmm.
not mind putting it down at this point. But she brings me the koala book, and she will talk about the very kind koala and talk about how mommy is sad and mommy went to a doctor and the very kind koala offered to carry a baby in her pouch. And now she has started to name the characters after our surrogate, and her husband appears and their children appear. And so she has connected the very kind koala to our own family story, and I cannot get enough of it.
That is so beautiful. And what an amazing celebration of just her story and what made her. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that so much. Oh, Words and stories are the best.
The best. The best.
Crystal, thank you again just for all that you do. And I just could not be more grateful that your own journey that started from where it was in grief and just not knowing what to do next has resulted in you being here to just guide and give wisdom to other parents as they start their own journey. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, friend.